Thank you.
And so, are we recording now? Or let me see. Did, it, did you start it?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. So, as one of the advisors to the Progressive Democrats of American River College, I'd like to welcome our special guest, Omega Brewer Gonzalez. It's really exciting that she has that cool extra name there. Recently married. And she is the acting political director of SCIU 1000. If you guys don't know, it's a union of the public employees, one of the largest unions in the state. And so we're really lucky to have her. And I would like some of the officers maybe to introduce themselves. We don't have time for everybody later on, hopefully as they arrive. Go ahead, officers.
I'm Ryle. I'm pretty sure I'm vice president of the Sociology Club.
And maybe Jeff, our other advisor.
Looks like the president of the Sociology Club just dipped out for a second, but hello, Amiga. I'm Jeff, Professor Jeff Saka, here in sociology. Really excited to hear your perspective on this topic. I grew up in a hardcore union household, Teamsters Local 117 up in Seattle. So my mom worked for the union, and then my dad always worked a job as a member of the union. So
yeah,
Me too, my brother.
There you go. And, day after Labor Day, great time to have a labor representative. I'm involved with the Labor Council here in Sacramento from the Los Rios Teachers Union. And so, Amiga, in addition to your thoughts on the recall, we would also appreciate just a little bit about who you are, your story that got you to this position, and the other things that you do in the local community. So go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for having me. My name is Omega Brewer Gonzalez. The Gonzalez is a new addition. I was married a little over a year ago. We just had our anniversary. My husband is actually Cuban. He is a refugee from Cuba, and so we have a lot of conversations just about that dynamic and the impacts of immigration and the different perspectives, because he comes from a more conservative family. He's not conservative, but he does come from a conservative family. He has Trump supporters in his family. His cousin is a retired cop. That's a whole nother story, but I digress. I, like Jeff, Sacha, was raised in a union family. My grandfather was an auto worker. My mom's side of the family's from Detroit. And so very, very heavily auto worker. He passed away in the late 70s, and my grandma received his pension until she passed in 2001. My dad was a state employee. He actually was a member of Local 1000 until he retired. He's since passed on. I have a cousin. Labor is very much part of my family. My cousin is today the secretary treasurer for AFSCME Michigan State Council. So, labor is in the blood. And so I don't know, I get asked that question about my evolution into politics. There really was no evolution. Politics was very much a part of the conversation around the dinner table all my life. And so I was having dinner with my best friend, and she was saying, Omega, there's no way, like, nothing in your life, including your job, is a surprise. Like, she's known me since we were 13. And like, even as a 13-year-old in high school, I was that activist. I was in student government. I was the one with the petitions trying to change the world. That was always me. So it's no surprise I work in labor. I love the labor movement, but I also at times get frustrated by the labor movement. because the bottom line is I'm a Black woman. And the labor movement has not always been kind to people who look like me. And so, but thankfully, labor has evolved a lot and is still evolving. And so it gives me hope and, is the fuel that I use to keep in this fight. Because I say all the time, I can change my party, I can change my job, but I can't change nor would I want to change being a Black woman and with everything that goes with that. And so everything that I do has that lens. So with that said, why I feel that our progressive brothers and sisters, should, stand strong against this recall is Gavin Newsom perfect? Hell no. He's probably not who many of us would have voted for if we had a viable alternative. But I also say
he was my third choice.
But I also say that he has leaned in to certain things that have been controversial more than any governor I've ever seen. I mean, on the day of his inauguration, he made it clear that, Black lives do matter, and, the work that he's done with this with the pandemic in trying to keep Californians safe, for a disease, that disproportionately kills Black people, it does matter. And so, is he perfect? Should he not have gone to that damn dinner? No. Is he perfect? No. Do we still want single payer? You goddamn right we do. But, and Gavin Newsom is not the sole, he can't do it by himself. I think, and he's the better alternative than anybody else on that flipping ballot. I'm sorry, if we think that it's hard getting single payer now, what the hell do we think is going to happen if Larry Elder is in office? So to me, if we, change, there are points in time where change happens in big chunks, but most change doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, this is a time where we need to take advantage of every major change we can get. And we can continue to push Gavin Newsom, and we should. But I just don't believe that there is a better alternative in this moment. That was kind of my intro and why I think that we as progressives need to support Gavin Newsom. But I'm not sure, if I even answered the question. Sorry, I digress sometimes.
Omega, thank you so much for the intro. I have a question. As someone who's been in the movement as extensively as you have, and all through Newsom's time in office, are there are there issues that you would have liked to have seen him act more forcefully on? Or are there opportunities that he's had and missed that to be more of an active, advocate and accomplice with the labor movement? Are there specific issues that you would take with what he's done or not done?
I think if you'd asked me this question a year and a half ago, I would have a different answer. But given the circumstances that we're at today, I honestly, with this pandemic, this pandemic is monopolizing, everything. As it, I think, to me, he could have been stronger as far as stay-at-home orders. I think he could have, been more aggressive as far as vaccine mandates, if, in order to reopen in the first place. I think that, he got gun shy because of this pending recall attempt. And, I think that he's trying to he's trying to save his job. And so I understand the thinking behind that, but I honestly don't think that was the best for public health. But I also know, what do you do? Because if you anger enough of that opposition, they will come out. You know what I mean? So, and there's enough apathy and frustration that, his job was in question. So, it's a hard question to answer because we are in the middle. It's hard to negate that. We are in the middle. The only thing that I would absolutely say, like we were talking earlier about those big moments, I think this could have been a bigger moment to push for, even if it wasn't single payer, which would be the most ideal, then what other mechanism could we put in as a state to ensure that people had health care during this time? Like the reasons, and also, you know, I also understand that Governor Newsom was put in a bad situation by not getting the support from the federal government. That's why most of the, you know, states didn't completely shut down, because there was no universal, you know, unilateral, uniform, I'm getting all the words wrong, uniform, you know, policy with resources to support it. So, I mean, California did a lot, and Californian dollars stretch a lot. You know, we represent workers, right? And we represent workers at EDD, and I can't tell you that how many hours many of them have had to work. They have had to work, you know, 80, 90-hour work weeks in order to process claims. They're tired, they're worn out. We represent workers who are at the prisons, you know, where there have been multiple COVID outbreaks, and trying to keep themselves safe, the inmates safe and healthy, and then still have to worry about what they carry home to their families. We represent the nurses there. We represent food service workers there. So we represent people who have direct contact with inmates, you know, in a system that isn't designed to really support inmates as it is. You know, so I would say, you know, a couple years ago, I might have had a different answer, but given the totality of the circumstances we're in today, including the lack of federal support, I don't know that I would answer that. I think he's handled it the best he could.
Let me tell you, the best part of any visitor, I've always thought, is the give and take of Q&A. And so let's open it up to some more folks that want to ask questions of our guest.
I have a question. I have a question. So I wanted to ask a question regarding Larry Elder. And so what I wanted to know is that if I actually think about it, I don't actually know what authorities the governor has, right? So let's just say hypothetically that Larry Elder wins. What exactly would change in California? What could he change immediately, and what would happen up until the next governor?
Well, anything that can be done by executive order, he could do. Which, you know, we do have the benefit of having a 2/3 majority, a supermajority in the state legislature. So anything that required legislation, you know, he wouldn't get passed. Like he wouldn't, like even if he vetoed something, the chances are very high that the veto would be overridden. Initially, and I'm going to say initially, because I worked in politics. I used to be the district director for one of our state senators, Dr. Richard Pan, and I can tell you there are times of a legislative cycle when electors lose courage, and that is any time near close to being reelected. And so we're about to hit that time. So there are times where we think they're not bold now. Well, they can be. I use the phrase "punk ass politicians." There's no. I don't know how to best answer that question, because the bottom line is anything Gavin Newsom has done or any other governor's done by executive order, they can do. They can change. They can alter regulations. Until it's challenged by court. I mean, executive branches test their executive powers all the time.
And he has a short amount of time to do it. So, you know, there's people out there already planning to like quickly do something, whatever they can. It's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even Gavin Newsom, who was granted a lot of latitude and a lot of executive power in order to navigate this pandemic, has gotten pushback and rollback from the legislature. And that was Democrat on Democrat saying, and they were saying, hey, you know, we gave you a lot of latitude because of this emergency, but some of this needs to come to us. Like some of this needs to actually be legislation, and let's go back and, you know, or if you don't, you know, do it willingly, we will go back and change the legislation we enacted to give you more power. So I mean, there's always that test, you know, that push and pull, but that's, you know, how our system was designed. There was checks and balances for a reason.
Next question. Oh, come on.
I have a question.
There you go.
If he were to be recalled, what do you think would be the first change that would be put in place? Like the first thing that would affect Americans, basically, or not Americans, Californians, basically.
Californians. Yeah. So the vaccine mandates are things that were done by executive order. So there would be an executive order to remove those, and he's already said that. So pretty much most of what has been done during this pandemic has been done through executive order. You know, because the legislature granted this governor those powers, those increased powers to deal with the pandemic. So I would imagine, you know, and in part because Larry Elder said so, that he would undo most, if not all of that. Which is scary for me because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And so it's not like, you know, the Rona has gone, or excuse me, COVID-19 has gone away. It hasn't gone away. So that would be the first thing. I mean, minimum wage, he doesn't have the power to change minimum wage. You know, he doesn't, I would say the state agencies that aren't governed by or aren't ran by a state constitutional officer, you know, there would be impacts there. Let's see, what are some other specific executives? I would say, I mean, he may veto some stuff, but that'll be overridden. Line item veto, but that could be overridden. And to be honest, I don't think that we can solely rely on the override because, again, our legislature is, even though it's a 2/3, you know, supermajority, there are also a lot of corporate Dems, you know, a lot of, you know, that moderate that mod caucus. And so, you know, I think that there is a pathway for Larry Elder to build some support there, you know, to you know, to kill some override. So it's even though yes, there's a super majority, it doesn't mean that we have the votes. I mean, let's look at what happened with the fast food worker bill. It was killed by Democrats. So
I have a question regarding there's been, at least talking to my friends and family about the ballot specifically, even if I think Newsom has gone out to say this, but even if you choose not to recall them, you should leave the second part of the ballot blank. What is your view on that? So even though we don't want to get rid of Newsom, but should we still pick maybe another Democrat who's running just in case, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, you know, you know, after just mentioning the mod caucus, not all the people with a D are true Democrats. And I don't know enough about the other four. In fact, I know at least two of them. The little bit I know is at least two of them were Republicans. And the reality is that folks know that you can't win, you know, a statewide office in California as a Republican. So, you know, they changed their parties. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of that throughout the state, especially since the top two became the law of California. That is what I encourage people to do, leave it blank, because that's, you know, the rationale. But I don't know. I think the most important thing is voting no.
I had a another question. So I wanted to ask, why, why, why is it Larry Elder that's the one that's leading? Like, is it because, do you think it's representative of what the Republicans in California want, or do you think um, it's more like because the guy had a lot of, like, was he like the one who had the most ads, and in the Republican field was he even like, I guess you could say, the most radical one? Because from what I've seen, he said some pretty crazy stuff like abolishing the minimum wage or being anti-vax and stuff like that.
I'm not sure I understood what your question was.
Oh, my
Why
question.
Larry Elder?
Yeah, why do you think it's specifically him of all the Republican candidates that's like leading, sort of? Even though I think he'd only have
Because
like
he has a
or something at max.
because he has a presence that's not related to well, I guess it is related to politics, but he has a media presence. He has a talk show. He has the ability to market. Basically, it's that skill set. It's and California, for whatever reason, we just love those types of people. I mean, we didn't apparently learn our damn lesson when we elected Ronald Reagan, who was an actor. We did it again with damn Arnold Schwarzenegger. So why wouldn't we do a radio host? This is California. It's Hollywood. It's just stupid. But apparently we don't learn our lessons in the States. But I believe really it is because of his media presence, his radio, the fact that, people that star factor. The same thing with Donald Trump. I mean, just did it on a national level. But you appeal to the worst of base instinct of people's worst base instinct, and there we go.
Have there been any Democrat candidates that have been radio personalities? Because now that I think about it, all the ones I can think of in the past have been Republican ones.
I don't know. I mean, like but think about. I don't know if they were radio personalities, but I mean, Larry Flint. Those of us who remember when Gray Davis was recalled. We had the porn guy. We had Gary Coleman.
Wasn't Al Franken a comedian from Minnesota?
Yes, I mean, he's a comedian. Gary Coleman. It wasn't like last recall. There was 15, 11 people too, and some of them were, colorful characters. People, and they got votes. That's the crazy part. They got votes. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, you ask a lot of people, they saw the Terminator, and they voted his ass in as governor. We all are, we're tapped in one way or another. We pay attention to politics, we read, we educate ourselves, we watch, different programs beyond mainstream media. But you have to remember, the average person does not. They vote based on what they see on commercials, or what they get on mail pieces. Or if they are lucky enough to have a family member who actually pays attention, that's what they vote on. The average voter is not an educated voter. The average voter votes based on instincts, personal opinion, and catchphrases. That's why messaging is so canned. It's not about policy.
Ballot designation, what you say you are, your last name, where you are on the ballot, if you're up higher, all that crazy stuff actually matters. And a lot of local elections are so close that those really matter. Hey, we were at 13 for a little bit, but now we're holding steady at 12. I want to get a quick picture of everybody. Okay, so everybody, particularly like Malik, get your face in your screen there, and anybody else who might be able to, please put your video on so I can get you. If Eric, Lori, or Nicholas want to, that would be cool.
Walter, I just grabbed a screenshot of my screen, so
Oh, okay.
we should be okay. That way you don't get
Got it?
that way you don't get the grid lines. But
You'll post it? Okay.
oh, I'll give everyone a chance to smile and look cute. Ready? 1, 2, 3. There we go. All
Thank
right,
you.
there we go.
Thank
We got Malik's good side there.
There you go.
Yeah.
My good side is my inside. But okay, next. Go for it. Anybody? I got a bunch, but it's the students first.
Yes. I always have to bite my tongue a little bit because I've got so many too. But
Anybody? Okay, you go first, Jeff.
Amiga, I was just wondering about your route into your job and how for our students, for our club members who are going through their education right now and considering professional life and what professional life is going to look like after they get, whether it's a sociology degree or some other kind of degree. If you could share some of your own experiences and how you came to the job that you have now.
Sure. So I actually was a union member for 16 years. I was a union leader with CSEA school employees. I was the president for 7 of those years, and I was the chief steward or the chief negotiator the whole time. So I was very, very active. To say I was active in my union is probably an understatement. I was a hellraiser. And that's actually how I met Dr. Pan. It was during the time of the financial crisis. The school district I used to work for was hit pretty hard. I worked in the Thomas Unified School District for 16 years, and it didn't have to be. There was, we represented classified employees, and so there were times when we held meetings with the superintendent or the board, and we would explain the numbers. And they would always ask me, "How do you know?" I'm like, "Who does the books? Who does the calculations that the business manager gives to you? It's my members." And so they didn't like that, and so they actually fired me after 16 years because they found out I was trying to take out a couple of the board members. And so they used that to fire me. And Dr. Pan actually took a stand with me. He thought that was a bunch of BS and that it was probably because of my union activity, and really stood by me during that time and helped me get my first campaign job. I worked on the Yes on 30, No on 32 campaign back when Jerry Brown had first gotten back into office, so to get school funding and to stop the paycheck attacks so that dues couldn't be collected on a paycheck. So luckily we were victorious. And a few months after that, I went to work for Dr. Pan when he was still in the assembly and helped him get elected to the Senate and was promoted to district director. Worked for Dr. Pan for a few years, but my heart was always in labor. I came from labor, like I mentioned earlier, came from a labor family. Like the truth is that labor really is the avenue that helps communities of color, lifted many people out of poverty. Literally, it did that for my family. And so I wanted to give back. And so I actually went to work for SEIU Local 2015 as the Northern California political coordinator. They represent home care workers and nursing home workers. And then came to Local 1000 a couple years ago. And so it was pretty organic how it happened. I got active in our county Democratic Party. That's how I met Walter. And, being the hellraiser that I am, that's what I did. And, I went to actions and tickets and supported different unions. And I missed labor. And so I went to actually work in the movement that had, taught me so much for my formative adult years.
Hey, I actually want to go even further back. I noticed you went to North Sacs High School, Rio Linda, and
Yep.
one of basically a feeder school for ARC, and so tell us about high school life. Was it supportive of you and your interests, like that? It's
very interesting because I was looking at, so my maid of honor, who is my best friend in the whole wide world, that's where we met the first week of high school at Rio Linda High School. And we were looking at my husband and I actually lived next door to her mom, and she was in town, so we were hanging out in her mom's garage. That's where, we still are at almost 50 years old, hanging out in the mom's garage when we want to, take a little smoke break. And so, so we were talking about high school and just, so we're just laughing because it's like, I remember us being 13, talking about boys and combing each other's hair. Now we're, almost like she teases me all the time. She's 2 months older than me, so she's my elder. My birthday is next week. I'll be 46. She's been 46 all of 2 months, and you would think she was a grandmother. But we were talking about how now we talk about being in early menopause and, all the stuff that life has, how much our lives have changed in the last 30 plus years. But one thing that didn't change and that we were talking about is like our activity. So I was always very active in like different clubs, Spanish Club, Future Business Leaders of America. And then my junior year, she convinced me to run for office in student government. So she was our junior class president, and then I was the junior class representative. And then the next year, our senior year, she was senior class. She was ASB president, and I was senior class vice president. So I was always very, very active and engaged, wanted to give back. Now, mind you, this was Rio Linda High School from 1989 to 1993. So it wasn't very diverse. As a matter of fact, we were looking at our senior panoramic picture, and the small group of Black people were us and our other friends that we all like hung out with. Maybe there were 10 of us in the entire senior class. Like, that's real. Like, there were times where we would come to school and the custodian would be trying to clean up the spray painted swastika with the niggas go home. Like, that was my experience in high school. I just happened, for whatever reason, to be very popular, and folks knew don't with me because I, as polite and proper as I can be, I also kick your ass. And so, so I never really had a lot of issues as far as that. And, I was a GATE student, honor student. So I was around kids who, we really cared about, academics. Now, mind you, my best friend was not an honor student, but, so we were always very positive. But it was tough, it was to change hearts and minds of people who, look at you and they see Black, and with that, they see their only judgment is based on what they see on the news. But in my life, that's not the first time I've been the one of the few or the only one. I went to Catholic school most of my elementary education, and I was the only one. In fact, there were times when it was me and my younger brother were the only two in the whole school. So, I had to learn very early, and which is so antithetical to my family. Like, my mom's from Detroit. Most of my family is still in Detroit. So I'd like to say all the time, I grew up bilingual. I grew up, with, that Midwestern, my dad's from Indiana, very Midwestern way of thinking, way of speaking. But I also grew up, knowing how to engage in white spaces because I had to, in order to achieve, what I had to code switch all the time. So, did it serve me? I think it equipped me to deal with the people that I deal with today, but it also came at a cost. It just did. And so, but it's a survival tactic that, I had to learn very early on, but I'm not in that way. I'm not unique.
Back to the students. Okay. Pause.
Oh, thank you. My birthday's on Tuesday. 46.
Come on. Who's got a question? Usually Lori has a question.
Oh, my
Okay,
bad.
go ahead, Malik.
All right. It's not much of a question, but I just want to say, I'm from North Sac too, Natomas. Went to Natomas schools also, so it's cool to hear your insights about the history and everything too. I'll be around the heights, and I've seen real in the high school, most definitely interactions. So it's crazy to hear about all that. So it's cool that you come from that for sure.
Oh yeah, I still live in the Thomas today. I worked in district for 16 years. My brother went to graduate from the Thomas High. Well, he actually graduated from Discovery High, the continuation school, but he started at the Thomas High. Right. Oh yeah, very much in the Thomas person.
Most there.
Walter, I had a question.
And my mama used to say, my mom used to say this about Natomas because she was the very first. If you go back and you look in the Natomas High School PTSA documents, my mother's name is there as the very first president. And she used to say all the time, because Natomas, and this was South Natomas, there wasn't even no North Natomas back then, that Natomas parents were bougie, and she said the only thing that separates us from the Heights is a bridge. And that is so true. No matter what way you went, even if you went over the freeway, you took, San Juan to Silver Eagle, or you went El Camino, there was a bridge. So she was like, stop being so damn bougie and thinking you're better than people, because the only thing that separates us from the hood is a bridge. And y'all think that's the hood. I'm from Detroit, so that was a whole nother conversation. So yeah,
for sure.
Okay, Jeff.
Walter, do we is Aramark still the service that we have for food distribution at ARC?
As far as I know, yeah, I think so.
I know that there was a campaign that had started to get launched by some student groups to oppose Aramark being our food service provider because of their involvement with for-profit prisons and immigrant detention centers and their staunch anti-union stance. What kind of advice would you give to students who wanted to put pressure on the district to make sure and have unionized, more social justice oriented contractors for things like food service?
So I think there's the initial, and I'm not sure where you've been in your campaign, but there's that initial education, right? Really talking about the benefits, of having unionized workers, actually the long-term cost savings. The one thing, we were able to beat back Aramark for years because it was all the appeal was always, well, there's this savings. Well, the reality is with contracting out, that savings is initial, and over the long term, or not even the super long term, like 10 years, 5 to 10 years, the cost, they usually jack up their prices and end up costing the district or entity more. And so, and there's the economic reasons, there's the emotional reasons or the moral reasons, that same level of commitment is just not the same. People usually live in their communities that they work in, that, especially classified workers, which is what they would be, that, they can't afford to live in freaking Folsom or Lincoln, or, they can't, so it would be contributing to their local economy. And so I would there's the education piece. Then there's the shaming piece, and, I'm down for shaming, but I also think shaming has a place, and there, it has to be about escalation. So, who are the allies on the board? I'm assuming this is a board decision. How many, knowing your target, how many votes do you have, assessing what their influence is, because they all have one. And then ultimately, the ultimate way is to withhold, don't buy from them. Don't buy from Aramark. But that's usually one of your last resorts. But I would say, what have you done to really apply leverage, that pressure on the sitting board members? Because the bottom line is, and Walter used to be a board member, we'll pick on him a little bit, is that board members don't want to be uncomfortable. The decisions that they make are already hard. You know what I mean? But they don't want to be uncomfortable, and sometimes as students, sometimes as constituents, our job is to make them uncomfortable. Make the decision that we want them to make less uncomfortable than not making that decision.
I had another question. So, in regards to workers' rights in California, what has been the effect of Prop 22 after its passage here in California?
Prop 22, that's the gig workers.
That's the one that Uber and Lyft promoted.
Yeah, the gig workers. I don't know that I have an answer to that, because as far as unionized workers, which is what I primarily work with, there hasn't really been much impact. I would say that for gig workers, my understanding is that all those promises Uber and Lyft made, they weren't real. They didn't happen. And so the question, I mean, really, I think that's a question for them, and it's a great organizing question, is how differently has your life changed? Did your pay increase? Did you get those health benefits they promised? My understanding is that they're taking more, like they've changed the rate for the rides, so they're actually getting less money. How much are Uber and Lyft, supporting wear and tear on your car? Like, all those things that an employee would get that they're not getting because of that proposition, I think it's really a question for them.
Anybody else? Maybe our newest person, Fiona, has a question. Oh, Laura usually has questions.
I guess I have another question.
Okay.
Well, I think I just blew Lori's mind because she, didn't know that the slave owners actually did get reparations. And no, apparently Larry Elder did not realize that.
Go ahead,
they were
Steve.
compensated for their lost property.
Yeah.
The value of their lost property.
That's ridiculous.
That's pretty crazy. I didn't know that. But what I wanted to ask is, why exactly has because I feel like whenever I hear people talk about unions, they talk about them really badly. Like my little brother who works at a construction site, he says that the union people are always badmouthed by the non-union people. And so I'm kind of curious, like, why exactly has the culture gone that way, where people can be really anti-union?
I think it's been a coordinated effort over the last 40 years, to do that, because the bottom line is, 40 plus years ago, there were way more unionized workers. The wage gap between the line worker and the CEO was nowhere near the level, was maybe 50 times more versus the 3 to 500 times more, for a CEO. Yes, especially since Reagan. I know it was a concerted effort. The messaging, that it's like that same type of messaging that we hear now about vaccines. It's about freedom. You're free to have a job and not be, not join a union. That's where the right to work messaging comes. And to be honest, the right to work messaging it has specific roots in anti-Black racism. And so, it goes along the same line as the Southern strategy. The Southern strategy was not a singular pronged strategy or event. It was to change the electorate and the hearts and minds of the electorate on many fronts, including unions, because unions are pro-worker, and so they wanted to kill the voice of working people.
Cool. Next. Anybody?
I have a question. How do you think the pandemic has affected people in unions due to the fact that so much, like, some people don't know what's going to happen to their job security and things like that? Have, like, unions kind of decreased or possibly even increased from the fact people, like, have more time to plan and stay at home, or at least some people do?
To be honest, I think one of the biggest union boosters was Donald Trump. Union membership was on an uptick during that time. I think that it depends on the perspective. 40% of union members are Republican on average. Some unions it's more or less. I think that it's to the pandemic feels differently or looks differently or is interpreted differently is probably the best way I can use it. Interpreted differently depending on what party you're in. So if you are a Republican union member, you know, in the pandemic, I know for a fact, because unfortunately my union just did it, had a rally at the Capitol fighting mask mandates and vaccine mandates. And so, you know, and we're talking about people who work in prisons. Like these were workers who work in a prison where there has been a COVID outbreak because of that whole "it's my freedom" argument. If you're a Democrat, or I should say, not even about party, if you're more liberal, progressive-minded liberal, then it's, I mean, you're standing with your union more. You are supporting your union. You understand that your union is looking out for you, not just your health, but helping to give you the tools to look out for others' health. I think it's just unfortunate that it's become a left-right issue, and a union is a microcosm of the greater society. So a union is no different. Union members are no different. They're members of their whole people. They're members of their community. So, you know, if you're a more conservative union member, then you're mad as hell at the union because they're supporting the damn mask mandate. If you're a more liberal, more left-leaning member of the union, then you think that is not going fast enough or hard enough. In fact, I have a call to return from a member who is a more conservative member who is upset because they heard that SEIU California supports mask mandates, and there's, I guess, some pending legislation, and because they heard SEIU California supports that, they're very upset.
Hi. I'm very late to the game. Sorry. So unions are protected by law. People have the right to form unions and not be discriminated against. Yet there's a real struggle to form unions. We've seen that with McDonald's, which can just go, well, we can hire new people, so it doesn't matter. And Amazon, which lobbied against it and which has been taken to court, but Amazon is huge. So from very, very large companies, and it's probably very difficult at smaller ones too. Also, I can turn on my camera. Hi, here's my face. It's difficult to form unions. Is there a way that to make it better, to inform people more that they have rights, or to support them with unions? Because there have been walkouts and strikes before, but I haven't seen if that's really done anything yet.
Yes, this is one of the many reasons why politics matters, and why elections matter. The National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA, determines how workers can organize. And so ensuring, and then also they adjudicate the cases of unfair labor practice charges. You know, they adjudicate those cases. The who appoints the members of the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board, is the president. So that, and you know, just imagine how it was during the Trump administration and the appointees that were there during the Trump administration. So that's one way, is to make sure that we're electing people who will make good appointments. Also, the NLRA, I can't remember, Walter, I'm not sure if you do, how many years it's been since that's been amended. However many years it's been, it needs to be amended because it's you know, times have changed. I can't remember off the top of my head. Times have changed a lot. So definitely to make it easier for workers to unionize. So all that's governed in that bank of laws is for as far as the nation. And then each state has a public sector version. So for California, there are multiple, depending on the sector of workers, of different public sector laws that govern not only how one can become unionized, but also who adjudicates it. It's all adjudicated by PERB, which is the Public Employee Relations Board. So it would be, you know, getting laws in place to strengthen the ability to organize. But for private sector, it's the NLRA.
Yeah, and also there's been a recent Supreme Court decision that makes it harder to keep our unions, to keep our members. So yeah, Janice, yeah. So there's making unions and then there's keeping the unions. It's crazy. That's better. Yes. I think we're kind of there as far as time and topics. Unless anybody has any burning questions, it's time to say goodbye to our wonderful guest. Anybody before we say goodbye? Any final thoughts, Amiga?
Well, it was a pleasure being here and talking to you. If you are ever interested in, working in politics and you want some advice, Walter has my number. You have my permission to share it, and my email, and I'll gladly share thoughts. You are our future. I mean, I have been saying that for a long time. I'm saying it every day. The next generation, which is y'all, our generation didn't do the job. We just didn't. And I think we got sucked in by conveniences, and maybe we forgot some stuff. I don't know, but we didn't have the most courageous politicians coming out, the most progressive, and so it's your generation and the subsequent generations that I believe are going to save this country from the cray-cray that it has become. So however I can help you and to support you in your journey, please don't hesitate to reach out, because by taking your time to be in think groups like this and really to ask the questions and deep dive and to inform your next steps is all the right stuff. So thank you again. And if I don't know if anyone had any final questions before I check out.
Great. And there are still opportunities. There's a little bit of time left before the 14th to volunteer. There are still text banking and phone banking going on. And as you can see from our group, we got a lot of bright, knowledgeable, interested people. And so thank you very much, Amiga.
Please join me, everybody, in a quick round of applause for our guest speaker. Thank you, Amiga, for your time.